This episode is brought to you by Bug Zero Pest Control. We've all had home services that made things more stressful. Bug Zero isn't like that. The people they send are calm, professional, and actually respect your space. It's why we feel good talking about their Insectishield protection. Learn more at bugzero.com, and you can call or text 417-831-7378. That number again is 417-831-7378. Thank you, Bug Zero. Just a quick disclosure to share in conjunction with this podcast. Each of us are speaking to our personal experiences and do not consider ourselves experts and cannot offer medical, therapy, financial, or legal advice. We represent a wide range of experience on the autism spectrum and will always honor each perspective that is brought to our discussions. Our experiences, opinions, and perspectives are all unique and different and will be celebrated. Thank you so much for listening and connecting with us. Thank you.
Welcome back to Navigating Adult Autism Podcast. We are here with Dawn, Elizabeth, Heather on the phone, and me, Tara. And our guest is Angie Groven. She's come back to talk about this probably uncomfortable, but also needed topic of sex, hygiene, and adult relationships. Tonight, we're diving into one of those topics that most of us moms would probably rather avoid, but we know we can't. We're talking about sex and hygiene for our adult children on the spectrum. Our kids are growing up, their bodies are changing, and many of them are starting to seek adult relationships, and they want connection and affection and love, just like everyone else. But they often need things explained in a clear and concrete way. So these conversations can feel awkward at first, but they're so important. And if we don't guide them, the internet or someone else will. And that can lead to some confusion or even unsafe situations. So tonight, we're going to talk openly, mom to mom, about how to start these conversations, how to teach healthy habits, and how to help our kids build safe, confident, and respectful relationships as they step into adulthood. So I think we're going to start with maybe some hygiene topics. Anybody want to start us out on that?
Well, let me, I can maybe kind of kick us off here thinking back about, with Nicole, my oldest, diagnosed. And, hygiene is really, a really important topic. And as we get into that, it's interesting because when you're doing hygiene, there's a difference between girls and boys.
Absolutely.
Right? So, at that point, I had 3 daughters before we had Nathan, our son. And, we didn't live on a farm. We didn't have any boy animals. Boy cousins lived far away. And, as we're growing up and, and thinking about different things in our lives, typically children start to notice things. They notice differences. Somebody's different than me in this way or that way. And it was just interesting as, we had Nathan. I thought, oh, this is the perfect opportunity. He's just a little brother and he's so cute. And their favorite story was talking about how the stream came up and he hit all the nurses. So I'm like, okay, there's my opening. We're going to learn the difference between boys and girls because, boys and girls hygiene is different, right? So changing the diaper. Well, Nathan ended up with a hernia. So he was only, a couple weeks old. Would it be inguinal or linguinal? Inguinal hernia. So it's down in the crotch area, right? So, we explained to the girls, he's going to have to go have this surgery and we're going to get this done. And it was like, okay. And we brought him back after the surgery. She's there. She's, her brother's okay. Changing his diaper. I opened his diaper and she goes, wait a minute. I thought they were going to fix that.
That's funny.
And I said, well, honey, you just learned the difference between boys and girls. And she goes, oh, okay. Oh, and, she probably should have known a little bit before then. She wasn't that old, but she was old enough. She should have already figured out there was something, but she just was, it was the funniest thing.
That is so funny.
Like, yeah, I thought they were going to fix that.
So that sort of brings up the fact of, what moment, when do we tackle this? was there a specific moment in our kids' lives where we just thought, oh, we need to start talking about this, hygiene is what I'm talking about. Not
Well, I think at hygiene is really the best place to start because boys and girls have folds and boys don't. And so when do we start,
I taught high school functional skills, so it was 9th through 12th grade. And I really noticed that you needed to start the second that they were curious at all. Once they got to me in 9th grade, it was time to start for sure. But when they were in that middle school age, they had, of course, you get a little bit of learning in the classroom, but then you have to kind of gauge how much their parents have told them. And I noticed that if you can mix it up with something that's not so weird, that you can introduce that in 9th grade and build on their foundation of learning pretty easily. I always thought you could mix together science and hygiene easily. Any science lesson you do that has to do with bacteria, single-celled organisms, even if you're teaching about caves, things grow where it is dark and wet. And where else is dark and wet? Our hot spots. I don't know if all functional skills teachers teach private areas as hotspots, but I teach it as hotspots because you can bring it up to the armpits and also talk about those. But I think 9th grade is the youngest that I think teachers should be supplementing that hygiene information. Middle school, before the hair starts, we should probably tell them the hair's coming.
Yeah.
That's what we did. I have 3 stepsons. And that's what we told them before the hair came, that the hair was coming, just so they weren't shocked and amazed. But yeah, once you start talking about bacteria, I think teachers can really supplement hygiene.
Dawn, I see you thinking over there.
I did. And then I was thinking, well, it's not really hygiene per se. It's just that our kids are going to pick up knowledge from peers. Mm-hmm. And I believe my son was challenged to do something, exhibit a sexual behavior because he was challenged to do it by his peers. So I probably should have addressed some issues, even in middle school.
We called that
middle school.
Yeah, we called that school bus
middle school.
education. Did you guys call that school bus education?
I didn't have a label for it.
Yeah, well, we called it that. I'm from Eastern Indiana, and we always called that, if you knew something inappropriate that you wouldn't want to repeat to your parents, that was your school bus education.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a good way it's the same thing. It's how do you get ahead of, because you don't know when their peers are learning something. You know when your child learns something because you helped teach, or you know that the teacher's supplementing, but how do you know when their friends learned it? My parents started teaching me about intimacy at 8 years old. And that was very, very young. And my peers' parents had no idea that I knew things that my peers did not need to be talking about on the school bus. So I was kind of an unintentional source of information.
Right.
And then you get into people who want to use that information. You get young adults that want to use that information to hurt other people. And that's so ridiculous that your son got in the middle of that. How did he get through, if you don't mind me asking, how did he get through that?
It was a disciplinary action from the school, which then went to juvenile, but it didn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
Basically, once I could convince them, I don't think he is a threat to society.
Yes.
And here's what we're going to do to protect him and protect others. My daughter was, in the house, and it was really a non-issue. But for a while there, what am I going to do?
When we're talking about our kids, they get labeled really fast, especially with something like that, inappropriate behavior. Then they become, they get that label. I remember when Chase was he was in middle school. He'd get dropped off at my work, and one day I got called and said he had touched the bus aide's breasts, and I was like, what, and they were quick to go there, right? So I walk out to the bus, and this was a small school bus, a very large woman, and when she walks by, she's leaning over, pressing into, every other kid's face, and Chase put his hand, and that's what he told me. if anybody had stopped to ask him, well, she was smashing me.
Right.
And, but they immediately, did they do that with all kids?
Right.
Did they immediately went to that he did something inappropriate. And so the more investigating I did, Chase wasn't the only one. And I said, well, you get that woman a bigger bus, so she doesn't have to lean over these kids that are right at that height. And she's just pressing right into their face. And he was the only one that was like, yeah, I don't like that. And I don't think it even had to do anything with what body part it was. It would have been her elbow. It would have been
something like, get away from me.
Yeah, he's like, you're smashing me. Don't do that.
And assume good intention. I think that I actually tell my clients that constantly, but I think we need to hear that. I think neurotypical thinkers also need to hear that. Assume good intentions.
Yeah. It's called positive intent.
100%. And don't hear what I didn't say. I cannot off the top of my head remember which beautiful disability social media is doing that trend right now, but they've got shirts that say, don't hear what I didn't say. He did not grab someone. He protected his face. Don't assume what you didn't see. Don't hear what I didn't say. And assume good intentions, I think, is a big part of that. I was in a lot of disciplinary meetings. Once your student as a functional skills teacher has been in so many situations where they've been disciplined, you have to have a manifestation meeting to see if the behavior is a manifestation of their disability. And I'm so thankful for that meeting and I'm not even in the classroom anymore as an educator, but I'm thankful for that meeting because it's so often that's overlooked because you're looking at everything that happened on a piece of paper, typed out by people who witnessed it or were near it. In a manifestation meeting, everyone's at the table, everyone speaks, everyone talks, and you get to stick up for everyone at the table that's involved. That should always be, that should be it from the get-go. We should be asking everyone for information and support right from the beginning, and assume good intentions is a huge one.
Yeah. Great point. And I want one of those t-shirts.
Yeah. When I find it later, I will send that to you because I think it's a big point to be made, especially with our young people that get in trouble at work. Oh, I know we're getting a little bit from hygiene, but just don't assume if you can help it, and you'll be supporting an individual with developmental disabilities so much easier.
Yeah.
But like thinking about hygiene, I was also really, as we were talking about this upcoming topic, I was thinking about we need to use the correct medical terms as well. I've noticed that young people can get stuck on the childish kind of made up terms for body parts. And where my parents, I think they did a really good job, even though they were teaching me too early. They taught me all the medical terms for the parts. And then my school bus knowledge ended up being the jokey, silly terms.
Right.
Did you guys do that for the most part?
I had to be careful with Zion because I didn't want him to yell it out.
Yes.
But at home, definitely. Yeah. I think he learned, I mean, he's still every now and then, I know he's joking because he knows exactly what everything is called, but he still calls sex birds and the bees.
Yes.
But it's more of just to ease the tension in the house. But yeah, and I think he learned that on a cartoon. I'm not sure, but I think it was not a children's cartoon. I don't think, but yeah, we use the proper terms for everything. How about you, ladies?
So really that understanding came in the middle of my kids. So I've got 5. So the older ones, that was before we were really, as a whole society, understanding how important that was. And so while we did teach, we didn't review. And I know that one of mine, and I won't say which one it was, became a target because she knew the name, but she just couldn't remember it and she couldn't spit it out. And so then that unfortunately gave the others, other school children, schoolmates to make fun, and to tease and to harass. So, while we had reviewed it, it wasn't in our language very often. So, she kind of got to the point where she figured it out, but by then it was too late. And so now that, they're with the younger children, I've been educated on how important that was. And then watching her go through that, I kind of figured it out. But yeah, the difference between 33 and 20 and 23, that's kind of when that hit, when we were kind of told we were doing it wrong, when we thought we were, I don't know, we didn't even think we were protecting. It was just awkward and we didn't go there. We just didn't.
Did your mom go there with you? I mean, I'm just like background information because we were talking about it earlier before the mic started that I am very open with my kids because my mom didn't seem to be very open with us. And I don't know if that was because my parents were pretty religious and, a lot of that was saved for marriage or, I'm not quite sure, but I was not, or it's because my mom is a baby boomer. I'm not sure. But I just didn't feel like I was very prepared at all with like even just proper terms.
My mom told me that if I went to my marriage bed without any knowledge, that the person with more knowledge was in charge.
Ooh,
and she said that was one of the reasons why she taught me so much. Still wish it was a little bit later. But she said, I'm going to teach you a bunch because knowledge is going to give you the upper hand in all of these situations. And I got to give her credit to that. That 100% was true.
Yeah.
That I knew myself way sooner and didn't have any questions about myself. So I couldn't be told anything that was false or untrue.
Right.
And that was really helpful. One thing my mom also did that I pull into my work as an executive functioning coach is the things that you do with your body are not often wrong, but they can be unpleasant. That was a huge lesson that I feel like I repeat that at least once a week with clients. It's not wrong to pull your hair and break it, but it can be unpleasant for others, picking your nails, picking your nose. And I really appreciated that. And I like to use it still because if you tell someone something is wrong, they're not always going to stop doing it. Often they'll just start doing it in secret or in a way that's less safe. And with our young people with autism, often, and I'm not always, but often they're very interested in their body processes. That's my body and that's my body process. So you see small stims like collecting hair, picking nose can be a stim more than anything. You see people who collect their own skin, and that's not, in their mind, that's not gross, that's mine. And I'm just keeping it. And that's where an executive functioning coach can come in and say, thank you for sharing that private stim with me. And what you're doing isn't wrong, but it can be unpleasant. So can we trade it? Can we switch it out with something else? And that's another way you can be really supportive when it comes to hygiene. I've noticed this. Can we replace it with something else is really helpful. I've noticed that these are your favorite underwear and you really don't want to change your underwear, but you need to change your underwear every day because that's a hot spot. So I bought 7 pairs of the exact same underwear.
Nice.
And we've all been there buying our kids the one fabric that they will wear, the one size or shape. So I think that's another way that we can really provide support.
I think also just setting it up. I know that we're all so tired when they're young, but setting them up for success early. Because, I mean, like if you have a rule, we always had, and this was so... This actually had to be modified because my child, I said, you have to at least take a bath on Mondays and Fridays. No, Mondays and Sundays. But as he got older and he started stinking more, I needed to throw in another day. So I wish that I would have, my kids were just not stinky and I was a very laid back mom. They had to take a full bath and shower twice a week. If they stunk, my other kids understood that, we could be flexible and they could take it another day. But for Zion, I had to make a rule. And I wish I would have started in the beginning when he was younger, 3 times a week or 4 times a week. But, kids are very, kids on the autism spectrum are very structured. You might just say every day.
And I think that structure is one of the reasons why this is such a hard topic to broach with our young adults.
It's so hard to change the structure.
100%. And you're telling them they're going to do something that might not even be within their realm of understanding. Like a girl or a young man might say, a girl wants to hang out with me and kiss me and do the things my mom and dad do. Are you joking?
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you get back around to that? And I think a shower schedule is the first step for sure.
Oh, and and I think that that's a huge motivator if they do want to have these relationships, these adult relationships, because I know a lot of our kids do. That's a great first step is, and that's a great way for them to be, if they want that, and see that in their future, the first step is starting with smelling better and, and brushing your teeth. And that has been a huge motivator for my son. So,
yes.
If we could get beyond, even beyond the hygiene factor, I think there's another reason we need to discuss openly sex and sexual activities. And that is because there are some things that are against the law. And they need to know that, and so, if we use masturbation as an example, that feels good, but you don't do it at the Battlefield Mall, so the time and the place, the touching of somebody else's hot spots.
And that can be taught very young. All of those things can be taught very young.
Yes.
We just need to know ahead of time. This is, if you're a young mom and you're listening to this episode, we are mature moms, and not that we know it all. I'm just saying this is what we've learned through the years. Start early, because if you can sort of, curb some of the, things that Dawn is talking about, things like that early on, and knowing appropriate behavior in which setting you're going to be in. It's never too early to know that. And appropriate behavior, I'm not talking about just sexual things. I'm talking about appropriate behavior in general.
I think starting early, too, takes some of the awkwardness away, because when they're a little bit younger, you can laugh. You can, talk about certain things and at a more minimal level, and then you build on it instead of waiting and then it be a big boom. You've talked about, you don't push people down the slide, but you just especially don't push them down touching their bottom.
Yes.
You don't, if you want to move someone, you start talking about touch and things. So then it's not earth shattering. It's not either.
Yeah. So then when you get to consent later on,
Yeah. And taking a couple episodes back where Robert Grant talked about phrasing the rule or whatever, it's other people's needs. We need to respect other people's needs and wishes. And most people don't want a stranger coming up and touching their intimate areas, their hot spots. And so just remind that this is a social, a social thing, and we're a part of society, and we don't do this out of respect for the other people, as well as the trouble it could get us into if somebody saw or chose to or go to the extreme in the interpretation of what the behavior was.
Right.
I think, Dawn, you brought up, the legality of things too, because we're talking about our kids that are over 18, that sometimes they're conversing maybe, on these online game things with people that could be much younger than them. And so I've talked to, my son, and I've said, you always need to, don't ever let anybody start talking this way and stuff, because so we've talked about that, but I have talked about the legal part. I said, sometimes there are going to be people that are young in there and they're children, and you don't know who's an adult, who's a child. And if something is said, I said, you can get in a lot of trouble. You can get in a lot of trouble and you won't even see it coming. So if anybody starts talking, about these things, don't join in, because.
Yeah.
I talk about that when I taught high school. I talked about that with hounding as well.
No
that
wonder he
a
wasn't
problem.
surprised.
Not at all. And I love being his high school teacher. But we talked about hounding a lot. That seemed to be one particular class I'm picturing. A lot of my young adults with on the spectrum, they hounded to get their way in specific situation, almost to a behavior extent. Like, well, Miss Groven, we can do this on Friday. No, we really should do this on Friday. Well, we should do this on Friday. And then you guys have probably all been in situations where, well, this is all I want. And then they push and push. And it's the only topic of conversation until it happens. And I think it's important when we're talking about these things, and this is a subject that a teacher can easily get into, is if you've hounded to get your way in an intimate situation, that's not consent. But consent is hard to teach because it isn't just verbal. It's also a feeling. It's kind of a sense in the air. It's a vibe. How do you teach that other than the word yes is important in consent? Both people have to say yes in consent. And if you have been told no, but then you ask and ask and ask and ask, and then you are eventually told yes, that is such a it's not a gray area to us at this table. We understand that that is not a gray area. But if you see the world in black and white, that is the grayest area.
Well, they said
period.
yes.
They said yes, I got what I wanted. And it's as simple as, but I'm not a bad person. And and this is one I saw in high school a lot. You can't hug people without their consent. But I'm a sweet person, and I'm a good person, and I'm a kind person, and she is mean because she told you, and I'm in trouble now for hugging her. That's not how consent works. And that's where I think parents and teachers really come together well, is we're all giving the same type of communication. But I mean, Elizabeth and we had no problem broaching hard topics when your child was in my class. I never really felt uncomfortable talking to parents in my 6 years teaching high school about where they wanted me to teach that topic, where they wanted my boundaries to be with their children and how I could support them and help them in that. But that's also a good thing I want to bring up, giving advice to teachers. Start with parents. Communication is huge. Do not overwhelm parents' boundaries when it comes to talking about intimacy, sex. Go ahead and talk about hygiene. We should talk about every part of hygiene. But when you get into intimacy, make sure you've got parents' consent. Make sure you're keeping that communication open. It is vital.
Because that is an interesting point, too, that, because I did just a little bit of training about relationships. And I can't remember how they said it, but it was a really good point because we all have different values. And it's not that one is right or one is wrong, but respecting, knowing where your values are. And if you are, I talked about the difference between, placing your values on your child versus sharing your values and letting them grow mature. But if you're sharing your values those are your family values, then those who are working with your child on these topics need to respect that. There's a point where that child will make their own decisions. But, one of the examples a long time ago when I was hearing and talking with, with those that were working with adults and there was brought into the discussion, pornography, allowing, or watching things, of a sexual nature and not even, and it was, I think it really just started with rated R movie versus not rated R. But to me, I said, I have my values and I hope that my children will choose to follow along this path. But at the same time, I look at Nathan, who's nonverbal, and to expose him to something like that when, will he ever have this type of relationship? I said to me, and they're arguing with me, well, he still should experience this and do this. And I said, okay, what if I put you in a chocolate house and you could smell it? You could maybe touch it with your finger, maybe lick it once in a while, but you could never eat the chocolate. Would that be fair? Mm-hmm. Would that be fair to expose someone that will not have a healthy, intimate sexual relationship? Is that even fair to them to expose them to that kind of stuff? Now, if it's things that are happening naturally, you don't want to put handcuffs on a person, but where, what are your thoughts on that? Because to me, that's what went to my mind was,
And I think because so many of our young men with autism spectrum, and maybe our young women, I do not know, are so visually affected. Yes. That's their strongest sense. And so if they're going to see pornography, and like you said, it may be, nude scenes in an R-rated film or anime. Have you seen some anime? It's like, my
it's
word.
extreme. It is extreme. And one thing I like to talk about often is, even if your young person did not seek it out, they still took it in, and they have to process that. And I would rather my young sons process it with someone they feel safe with than to keep going down that rabbit hole on the internet. And it really is a rabbit hole. You think when you get into Japanese, specifically pornography, there are reasons why they have such strict internet rules in a lot of these countries, because they're trying to add a level of protection. Of course, there's a lot of other parts to that, but adding a level of protection for young people are what a lot of that is built on. But you can add all of the protections in the world. I taught for quite a while with students that have Chromebooks every hour of the day, all day. And so often they would get through those incredible firewalls.
Right. Yeah.
Non-reading students getting through to pornography.
Yeah.
And the school is working hard. I give them all the credit in the world. I saw the action. I saw the work. They are working hard to protect them and keep them from this information. So the Chromebooks are just for schoolwork. But it's the internet.
Yeah. Well, even YouTube has inappropriate things.
100%.
And like, we have a little nephew that, because older people are not as tech savvy, and they don't know how.
Yes, I'm laughing.
they don't know how to put some of the structure around YouTube, and turn on some of the child features. Yeah. We have a little nephew that just gets way out into outer space with some of the stuff on YouTube. But it's not. It's almost like you just have to think way ahead of time. That this is absolutely going to happen. I want to tell a story about Zion, and it doesn't reflect badly on him, but I also want to talk about like what they're hearing at school, because our kids are also very susceptible to people taking advantage of them, and also listening and believing everything they're going to, everything that any of their peers are saying to them. So, this is a very, descriptive story, but Zion came home it might have been middle school. I think it was middle school. And he told us that these kids were his friends, and they were his best friends. He had just met them, and that he finally had friends. And I was so excited. And then the next day he said, can I get on the computer, because they told me to look up this one website, and then I have to go and tell them about it tomorrow. Well, what happened was it was a pornographic website, and they wanted him, to embarrass him. They wanted to know what he was going to go look at and then report back to them. Well, they got into a lot of trouble, but yeah, it's just, we just have to be very careful, because our kids are so trusting of others, and they want friends, and they want community, and they're gonna well, first of all, they may not know that they're listening themselves. But we just have to prepare for that, because, that was middle school, but that gave us, a parental lesson on, like, let's start thinking about this, Yeah. Of course, we stopped him because he told us right out what the website was. And we're like, no, let's not do that. So, but we went to the school and said he's no longer allowed to be around those boys. But then we broke his heart, because he thought they were his friends. So that's happened to us over and over again, like finding out that Zion is carrying lunch trays for all of these people, and then dumping the lunch trays because people have taken advantage of them, that he's being treated as their servant. So you have to really think about that in, the long run. Now he's a grown man, and he has a lot more maturity, and and can talk about these things in a mature way. But that definitely prepared us for some of these talks that we have now.
I think that's a great way to talk about consent too, is just because it makes this person happy or these people like you, is it something you should be doing?
Right.
I said no to you touching my body, but I realized later if I said yes, it would make you so, so happy.
Yes.
And we have to have those conversations, people pleasing big time, and wanting to be accepted and liked. And you add the cell phones. I'm so glad you started talking about media and media influence, because not only could our young adults make mistakes, like looking up something embarrassing on the internet in front of their friends, but then their friends have video cameras and they're taking video of this. And that is just, it's a nightmare. And I also want to say it's so clear that you and your husband are open, trustworthy people to talk to as well, because Zion came straight to you and had that conversation. But I've had students in the past with parents who were very explosive, very reactive, very, if something bad happened at school, it was such a big reaction, big to do, that they would just keep secrets, keep it to themselves. I don't want anything bad to happen to anyone. But he knew that he could talk to you guys. He knew that he could include you guys in every part of that. And then it happened again, which is so unfortunate, but still consistently, he knew not only were you there to support him, but you were there to find the right solutions for the people who had hurt him and harmed him. So I think as we're talking about this too, even though it's uncomfortable, even though it kind of makes us cringe a little bit to talk about intimacy with our children, being a safe person to talk to is going to open up so many of those doors that are closed for our young people, just because they struggle being on the spectrum. They struggle with communicating and making these connections, but we're right here and they trust us and they can talk to us.
Because I think what you're saying is if we shame them, they're not coming back.
No.
Right.
There's no way.
It'll be done in secret.
And they'll find that person that doesn't shame them. And then the trust will be so much firmer with someone who might not be telling them the right things.
Right.
And I think that you become kind of a team. And you don't think about team when you think about talking about intimacy. But if I'm communicating as a teacher with my young adults' parents, and they're communicating with their parents, we're a team coming together to make sure that they have the right information, they can support themselves, and they can protect themselves. So I think a big takeaway I'm going to have from this is that we all need to be working together to make sure they have the right information.
Yeah. One more thing on consent. Because we don't know the dating relationship of the person that I'm thinking of my son chooses. We need to also think about like their ability to consent. So like if our kids are dating someone, I don't want to say lower on the spectrum, but different on the spectrum, I think it's very important to teach our kids that they may not be able to consent, on their own. So that's a whole different conversation. So, I just think that, some kids are dating others on the spectrum and it's important.
Oh, Life Animated. Did you guys see that? It was just a wonderful show, and it showed they started out with using like Disney phrases to talk, and I'm almost sure this is Life Animated, but it was one, and a young man, he moved into his apartment. He had a girlfriend, lived in a different apartment. Beautiful relationship. They made cookies together, and they cuddled, and I think maybe they would just do a kiss, But brother comes along and says, well, you've been doing this for a while. This is the next step. And she wasn't ready for it. And so this young man had a beautiful, loving relationship, and you could see that, and he had not shown interest in taking it further, doing more, so he started to talk to her about it, and she was done. She was done. she didn't want to go there. She didn't, and it wasn't anything more. It was just more intense kissing. It was going from a peck on the cheek to making out type of thing, but he started to approach her and she just didn't want anything to do. And to me, it was the saddest thing because he longed for his girlfriend and he wanted to fix it and mend it, but he couldn't. But that, having somebody else come in and instead of helping them navigate that together, just gave all this advice and did that, pushing that. He started to hound his brother. So where are you at today? How much more? This is the natural progression of things. And he lost that relationship. And it was the saddest thing. I was so mad.
Yes. And how do we help them navigate that? Because, I hope both of those individuals were able to talk to somebody other than his brother and say, I'm stuck. What do I do next? And it's so hard to hear. This is what everyone does, because it's not what everyone does. It doesn't mean that's the right thing. We can kiss forever, and that's our thing. And I think us having those conversations ahead of time are huge. And as much as sometimes I struggle with how our young adults are portrayed on TV and a lot of these cool, like coming up TV shows that are coming up about relationships and autism, but they deserve to show the real effects of that. I'm so glad that they displayed that, because we need to be able to see that, how not only can families make our lives absolutely wonderful and beautiful, but also they can hold us back with things like that. That's really tough.
Yeah, there was a good level on the spectrum. There was a lady on there that she kept on saying she wanted someone who was going to have an adult, mature relationship with her. And she said it over and over. And as I watched her, and I loved her. I loved her character. It's not her character. It's her personality. It's a reality show. She just said that over and over. I just want someone who's going to have an adult, mature relationship with me, meaning sex. She wanted sex. But the one that she was dating, it was like a year later, and she was, as long as she was headed in that direction, she was okay with it. But finally he said that he wasn't, he was not comfortable with having sex before marriage. And that sort of, it broke her heart, but I don't think that it was necessarily, I don't know if it was, it was essentially the end of the relationship, but it was almost like someone had put that in her head, like this is the natural progression of a relationship, instead of just enjoying them, the friendship they had and having, I don't know. It just seemed, when she kept on saying that I want a mature adult relationship, it was almost like someone had put that in their head, and that was the natural progression of all human beings. That, at some point,
you don't reach.
Yeah. I think it's the cultural push is to lose your virginity, and and like Elizabeth, I have pretty strong convictions, and hopefully I've probably done a bad job, but to articulate the whys, why it might be wise to consider avoiding sex until you're married. And because there are, even that sounds so strict parameters, but there is some safety there. And I overheard my son tell his cousins, I'm still a virgin. You're sort of, okay. And, I need to follow up. It's okay. I always think back to, and I may have already said this on the podcast, in a book, Shadow Syndromes. And the thesis of the authors is that even though somebody may not meet the clinical DSM criteria, they may have a shadow. And so on the autism, profiling two young men, and one of them was in his 40s, and I guess he was feeling embarrassed about being a virgin. And so he made arrangements to visit a sex worker. So it was a colossal failure. there wasn't that intimacy, and the sex worker didn't comprehend the autism in that, and it was not accommodating.
Yeah.
And so, he had a horrible experience.
Which could mess him up for, all future relationships.
I'm not doing that again.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's that balance between sex is good, in the right situations, it's enjoyable, you'll have a good time. Yeah. But on the other hand, you want to do it wisely and safely, and you need to consider not only your wishes, but those of your partner. So that's where the consent and
it's not just a box to be checked off.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh.
And I feel like
Real good.
we can teach it so well and give the right information, but then it can be broken by something as simple as a dating app. We can talk about consent and waiting and making sure you know the right time. But so many dating apps, and I'm hearing this secondhand, I'm married, but I'm hearing mostly from my sister, that so many of these dating apps, they start a conversation and then the conversation immediately goes to intimacy and things that are completely out of what the word even means, dating app. And so our young people, and I know for sure that I have quite a few clients that are on dating apps and are perusing them to just try to find some level of connection, because going out there and physically finding connection is hard. And that's where I think not only an executive functioning coach, but I know that most direct service professionals, most direct service professionals are going to be able to help you establish boundaries and talk about these things. But I mean, what do you really do? How do we help them navigate the apps, have the conversations appropriately, and realize this is a dating app and these people don't want to date?
Yeah. I think you need someone that you trust. Mm-hmm. I know that Hannah, really is a trustworthy person for my son to bounce things off of. But Zion is to the point where he can look through because he does have the app. He does have the apps. I don't really know which ones he has, but I have put Hannah in charge of that. But he has had a lot of spam stuff where he thinks it is an actual person, but it's actually some sort of bot in Russia or something. Mm-hmm. But he also has had a couple of people that he's, that he's trying to find connection with. He's not, trying to find a hookup. Mm-hmm. But now coming from Hannah's point of view, my neurotypical daughter, everybody is trying to get a hookup.
She's also absolutely beautiful.
She is. And it's so frustrating. I'm not her mom, because I'm I just want someone, she wants connection too. She doesn't want that. And all these guys suck. I hate them. I mean, she's like, Mom, just go through these and just see which ones you think I should choose. And I'm like, oh, how about this guy? Oh, he sent me this, and it's gross. Yeah. They're all gross. So
I tell my neurotypical sons to go with their gut, but then I go sit down with a client to talk about how they feel lonely, and they don't have that gut feeling. Our individuals on the spectrum don't have a lot of those gut feelings, and we have to make it so much more black and white.
Oh my gosh. It has to be very clear parameters.
So clear. And even though there are social groups, I, as an executive functioning coach, I've still really had to tell my clients, we are going to a social group together. We are going to go meet people. Yeah. So they've got that want to connect more. But I think we are big supporters to parents, coaches, teachers, in saying, all right, now here are these groups. Let's find a social group. Let's find something that's not on an app. Not that dating apps are all bad, but I think that we can really supplement relationship conversations with real life situations out in social groups. I think that's really helpful. Yeah. Have you guys read anything or known any young men that have gotten caught up with the app scams, dating app scams, where you're sent a picture of an unclothed young lady, and then she says she's a young teenager, and then you have to pay all of this money not to get in trouble. Because she'll report you to the police.
Yeah.
And then you call the police, and you also owe the police money. And the police are not real. And to be totally anonymous, I did have a past student that was out $800.
Wow.
$800 before they finally said, I've got to tell my parents that this is out of control. Right. Just within the same week, I saw an article about a young man who was in the same situation, neurotypical, and he ended his own life.
Yeah.
We got to talk about this stuff.
Now, I have done a lot of papers on bullying in high school where girls have sent a picture of themselves to a boyfriend. That boyfriend then, either shares it around or it's someone over, a distance. And then they said that they will, show it to the school or whatever. And I've seen that kind of stuff. And I've seen a lot of young women in their lives because of that. There was the one in Louisiana or something that she had gone through it for so long. And she finally, I think she jumped off the water tower or something. It was so devastating. But, it was just this constant feeling of where she had to hide things and just making the rule. I've just told my kids, my kids are a little bit, they're not as religious as I was brought up. So I've just said, never send a picture of yourself to anyone because it lasts forever. Even if it's over Snapchat and you think that it's gone, someone has another phone over their shoulder and is taking a picture of that snapshot. So never send a naked picture to anyone.
And there's software now that will remove the clothing.
Oh, yeah, there is.
There is AI software now that will do that.
So, you didn't even allow the picture or take the picture yourself, but our wonderful technology.
With my high school aged, when my sons were high school aged, one thing that really helped, we have a plethora of laws against child pornography. Thankfully, we had the conversation early on. If you receive a picture that is risque or send one and you're a child or you receive one from a child, that can get you in a ton of trouble. Yes. And then we explained child pornography as a whole. Yeah. That helped a lot with we have to bring it back to something real. We have to bring back those connections. So talk about that young man that lost his life. I brought that article and showed it to my kids.
Yeah. 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 And as a husband who is in cybersecurity, never accept any type of attachment because you might be giving them access to use your hard drive as a child pornography hub, and then it disperses from your home computer, and then it looks like you are the one who is dispersing the child pornography. Really?
And Ashton Kutcher does not do Punk'd anymore. Ashton Kutcher has a website where he finds people. So if he shows up at your door, you are not part of a fun show anymore.
Yeah. He and his wife have a organization that combats child pornography and child sex trafficking.
Yes.
And I think that's why it's so important to not have shame about this because, just like you're saying, they can be just innocent walking in a store and somebody can use that technology. So, and then spread that around. And those sound like extreme cases, but they still happen. We know they happen. So if there's that open communication
and trust,
where they're not afraid to say the words, to say, well, they took a picture and, it showed this, or it showed me doing this, or, if we've made shame around those topics, then when something happens, it's not going to be $800. It's going to be their life,
I think this is where it's so important for dads to take moms are important. We're all important. But I know Jason's taken the lead with a lot of my boys, talking about sex, and I can hear him from the other room. But Jason and I we're not surprised at anything. And if you show that surprise, then maybe they're not going to come to you next time. But yeah. Anyways, I can give you some some practical things that we did. We do have a modem on our house. It's by Disney. It's called the Circle modem. and it's $5.99 a month, and you can set the parameters of whatever they are able to look at to like teen or adult or child, and that has helped us a lot. Also, you can also allow them, limit their time. So, and then if they do a chore, you can give them 15 minutes extra, give them rewards or whatever, but it's all within the limits of their age.
So does that cover like anything that's coming
Anything
through?
that's
so like
coming
if it's
through the
on
internet.
YouTube, so it's not just when you're on, your Disney.
Right. Yeah.
app.
So it does limit, like, so the YouTube, like whatever they're watching on YouTube has to be marked for the age it is. So if it isn't, if it's marked incorrectly, it may not filter that, but it really helped us. And then it also gives you a report of what they're trying to get into.
Okay.
So then you can have a conversation and have that open communication.
So let me ask you this then. This might be a hard question. Do you tell them up front that you've done this, or do you do it first?
I think that we've had it both ways. I think that in the beginning, they thought it was just to limit how much screen time they had. And then when we saw that they were trying to get onto some of these websites that were not appropriate, that's when we brought it up to their attention. Hey, just letting you know that, we can see what you're trying to search for. And do you have any questions? Just letting you know that we can see everything that you do. So yeah. And we used, I don't remember what it was before, but we had a bullying situation with our daughter before we had the Circle modem, and we did, we were able to get like an analog, some sort of like screening thing. And it didn't stop her from texting with this little boyfriend that she had at that time, but we could see what they were texting. And that brought up a lot of concerns about their relationship.
So it's phone too, not just computers.
Yeah, that was a phone program.
That was a phone program.
So I think that we paid quite a bit more for that because it was, 20, well, not 20, how old is Santa? It was probably 15 years ago. Well, maybe not that long. But we were able to see all of her texts, and that's what concerned us for that. We knew something was going on, so it sort of, So yeah, there are a lot of different hardware and software where you can, limit what your kids are seeing. And yeah.
Once your young adults get into our young adults on the spectrum get into their, late 20s, 30s, and it's often appropriate for them to stay at home. If you know for sure your young person cannot handle the vastness of the internet and would definitely get themselves into some type of tough situation, how do you deal with, and you guys haven't been in this position yet, I'm just kind of brainstorming. How
the age is right.
Right. How to deal with the anger that's probably going to come from that individual that you are limiting them. And this is something I've ran into a couple of times in the position that I'm working in now. And of course, it's case by case, and you help them work through the anger feelings there. But how do you have that conversation? You cannot handle this, and I'm helping you handle it.
We just turned off the Circle modem. Zion is 22, and I feel like we have had open communication with him. Our other son went away to college, and Hannah no longer lives here, so it's only Zion. And I really feel like he's so open with us now. I really feel like we've built that trust, and he comes to us with whatever he's dealing with, even when it comes to dating apps, things like that. And really, I can't control, everything. It's only what came through the Wi-Fi. So if his phone was outside of our house, I feel like he's had enough education that he is able to have these mature conversations. And I think he's such a skeptic. I think that, he literally says spam, bot, this person's not real, so he's pretty, my husband's a cybersecurity guy, so he's pretty knowledgeable about it now. So we have come to the place where we trust him. So I can't answer that for us.
I like Tara's comment earlier, start early, having a bath every night. Mm-hmm. We got that one down. So I did do a bath every night when they were young, and, so I'll give myself a pat on the head on that one.
Good job.
But
I'll give you a pat.
But JR has had unlimited. We have not monitored what he's viewing on his Xbox, the movies. I don't think I'm pretty sure he's not involved in pornography. I mean, I could be wrong because I'm not monitoring it. So, I mean, if I had to go back, I think that was a failure. That, at 28, I'm probably not going to go and say or restrict. I don't know, maybe I should. But starting early, I think, is a good.
And you don't know. I mean, I'm giving this is just. I mean, we have to have grace for ourselves too. We can't predict what the world, how fast technology was going to, flow. Yeah. It's hard to.
But tied with that, I think I wish I would have also, let's spend more time volunteering in the community. Let's spend more time visiting friends. Let's do, the entertainment and the internet, it's like easy way to kill time. And so you lose that ability to interact with people or wanting to interact with people. I'd rather, have the nagging suspicion JR would family was in our house this weekend. So his cousins were there, and no, he wasn't, for the most part, he was not interacting, We get angry resistance when we tell him, no, we're going to sit at the table. You can't eat in your room because normally he does.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
there's a flow, a flexibility, and you match the situation. I think that's a really fantastic lesson because we all need to know that.
Yeah. And for us, that conversation was basically took the disability out of it and talked about addiction.
Yes, absolutely.
I just went straight there. These things, they make you feel good. And then you just want more, whether it's just time on the internet or it's not even always what you're watching, but then you get these, these ideals that, this is what life's like from watching those, the videos, a lot of toy influencers and stuff. This is, most kids do not live in a house where every day's a party, and so as he got older, it turned to more of, that seeing certain things, it's only satisfying. It makes you happy, but then you've got to keep upping it. And we went over what is addiction. And addiction can be, mom's addicted to chocolate. Is it good for me to eat it every day for, breakfast, lunch, and dinner? No. Can I have some? Yes. So that really, I tried to, and this was with Chase, because Nathan's not at that point of understanding. But we do watch, his YouTube viewing. Somebody's always pretty close because things will slip in. And so you've got to watch it. And we've taught him those words. We've said, he knows, Nate, that's inappropriate. Click. Nathan, get off that one, because they'll start using language, and, they start with the language and then they'll start with other things. And so we watch them, but that was the conversation. We just went right to, if it makes you feel good, it can also make you feel better and better and better. And then that's when whatever it is gets control of you. And then you lose friends and you can't, all these things. And I've told him, you've told me you want a girlfriend one day. She's going to ask you, and she's going to look at what you've done with your time.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to be able to hide it. And things that you think you can hide now, they're going to come out. You can't live and breathe something every day and it not surface.
Right.
So you have to stop and watch what you're doing now, because that stuff sneaks in so quickly, especially the cartoons. Because that's where they found they can get the kids. Because I'm just watching a cartoon and you're just, you're not watching it's a cartoon.
They sneak in. It's not even adult humor as much as it is pushing the boundary of you're now teaching a child a whole new concept within a cartoon. Dawn, I appreciate that you brought up masturbation earlier, because if we're not talking about that, that can be an addiction. It can be something that becomes a big secretive hurt in a young person's life. Yeah. And talking about when your door is locked, that's your room, that's your space, and that's your time. But that can't be all the time. That can't be when you're in the classroom. That cannot be when you're on the school bus. That cannot be. But if we don't talk about it, then we have young people that will self-stimulate at school and then get in trouble. And that, at a certain age, goes straight to law. Right. It goes straight to some level of arrest, when in their brains, this just feels good. It's something that I really enjoy, and I don't know anything about it, so I'm not hurting anybody. So these conversations, I think that they break through we don't want them to assume. We don't want them to just wonder and, okay, this will be fine. This will be okay. If we don't say anything, then that void exists. And even worse, I know we talked about their friends will tell them what to do. And that's the worst thing I can think of, that their peers would give them information. Right. So I think I really appreciate that you brought that up earlier.
Yep. How do we, I know that I've talked about this with my boys, but how do you explain actual STDs, like the basic concepts of always wear protection, everything like that. And that also can relate more, I know that you guys,
if we're not there. Yeah.
Right. No, I meant if from a religious perspective, right. My parents really didn't talk about that because I was supposed to wait until marriage. But with my kids, I'm just so open with them because I just don't want them to, I tell Caleb this all the time. I was like, I do not want a grandchild right now. Right. I just, it's very important for me to have it very open and matter of fact that you just never, ever, have sex without a condom. And it's not just, it's very important that this is your, the boys do this, the girls do this. It's both of your responsibility. So what do you think about that, Angie?
I completely agree. And I think that teachers can, I'm thinking secondary level, can easily fit that into infectious diseases, those types of lessons. Because if you stop before you get to STIs and STDs, you're not giving the full range of information. I tell everybody this, that I eat lunch or dinner with. I don't share my drinks. I have had cold sores, which is, I think, herpes simplex virus 1 or one of them. Yeah. I get cold sores, and I've had them since I was probably 6. I shared an orange juice with my Nana when I was little, and she had an active cold sore at the time. And I've gotten them when it's hot outside, when I'm stressed out, when I have any trauma to my lip, I will get a cold sore. I can feel it coming. I can feel it on the wind. And I talk about that. I talk about my cold sores, and then we slip into a conversation of, well, herpes also exists other places. And then you move on to, there are diseases, infectious diseases that can actually break down your brain. That's how you talk about syphilis. And then you can get into, I know that we all have sons at the table, and you've got Hannah, but I also think about our young ladies on the spectrum. They need to know about the blood part too. We talk about blood with infectious disease and how you need to be careful with blood, but then they are literal young teenagers, little 14, 15-year-olds. And all of a sudden they have to deal with a large amount of blood for multiple days, a month, for the rest of their lives. but we're not talking. Well, we are now. I think society's much better about talking about it now, but we haven't always been good about talking about that, how to be cleanly, how to be safe with those things. And then I know we've talked about boys a lot, but I also think about the teaching we need to do with girls, because they have a liquid bodily discharge that's totally different from men. And then we understand that as women, but we don't understand that condoms are important. And I'm coming back all the way back around. Condoms are important because men start releasing sperm from the second of insertion, the absolute second that insertion starts. But when do we see the proof? At the end. We see the proof at the end. That's when you see that happen. But unless someone tells you sperm starts to come out of a male the second you start insertion, you think, okay, I only have to worry about the end part. That's where babies are made.
Yeah, because they, the joke is that, what couple, what do you call a couple who uses the pull out method? Pregnant.
Pregnant.
Yeah. Parents.
Yes,
Parents,
absolutely.
yeah, not pregnant.
And I had multiple, I can think of more than a dozen times I had young ladies in my functional skills high school class, and their parents are saying, we're explaining things like fluid and the menstrual cycle, but when it happens, she is losing her ever-loving mind. This is still a person on the spectrum. Yeah. This is still 100% a young adult on the spectrum, and they're in pain. There's biological things going on. There's so much happening. And I just appreciate that we're talking about this today, because I think teachers more often need to pull this information in, whether you're talking about infectious diseases, you're talking about relationships, you're talking about just hygiene in general. I change my underwear because there are things in that underwear, whether you can see it or not, is a good conversation to start with on a lot of what we're talking about right now.
And that might be just that's like just the fact of self-disclosures. Like 100%. This is what mom and dad do. This is what, we stay clean because there are, things that are living that you can't see.
Yes. And clean people have problems too in their hotspot areas. And I know we could just talk about that, the cleanliness and what can happen to your body forever. But unless we tell our young people, they just simply don't know that they've got to stay clean and hygienic down there.
Right. Because, and that's, just from the beginning, that's one of the first things I learned, was having a child diagnosed with autism is she's not going to be in environmental learning. She's not going to learn so much from the environment that I will need to teach her directly, and not just once, right? Not just telling her things once, you just feel like when we learned, with brushing her teeth, we didn't do it the normal amount that people did, we did it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times before she could do it successfully on her own. We didn't teach her, a couple times and supervise her. We literally spent hundreds of times making sure that she was doing an efficient job. And so, we can't, some of those things are just not going to pick up. Just like, I don't think I mentioned it, we were talking about it before. So my oldest, she told me one day she was really struggling with going to the bathroom. So I thought it was constipation. A day or two, maybe probably 2 days later, she says, "Oh, but it burns so bad." And I was like, "Oh, dang, I just gave you a bunch of Coke to help you, move things along. And I was making your UTI worse." And so that communication, because she thought she was telling me, and I thought, I didn't even think, and she was the right age. But I was just like, how did I miss that? But our communication just wasn't there. So some of those things that, they would tell me, or, surely if this itched or this, that, they'd tell me and they'd ask me, not necessarily. And are we listening with more than just our ears?
Right. I had a nonverbal client years ago, and, just the happiest. You get really lucky and just end up with the happiest people you've ever met. And this individual was happy every single day. And they were extra happy one day, squealing, making their fabulous noises, and grabbed the back of the chair, and just rubbed themselves across the side of this chair so hard. And then it made them happier, and they did it over and over again. And I stopped and I think you have a yeast infection or jock itch, or, depending male or woman, whatever itches, I think you might have a buildup of yeast. And then I was able to communicate to the parent. They kept an eye on it for an hour. But to circle back on assuming good intentions, I did not assume that person was self-stimulating or being inappropriate in that moment. I just saw that itching made them so happy. And they can't tell me something does not feel good, but I do know from, being a social person, talking to other people about personal, private things. I like to say that TMI is tell me immediately. I am not a hold back person. I love to talk about just about anything. I love this topic today. I love that we're breaking into conversations that are necessary for parents that are lost. Just absolutely lost for what to do next. And we're talking about fabulous things today. But yeah, tell me immediately.
I love that.
That's always been my big one.
It's sort of interesting. But I'm a gerontologist at heart, and with our older adults, like when they get a UTI, you see a lot of delirium symptoms come out.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever heard of that. And like some people even think, oh, they're, in the beginning stages of some sort of dementia or something. But it's actually, you treat them with an antibiotic, and then they all of a sudden don't have delirium anymore. And it's just a crazy factor. So UTIs can really mess you up. So keep yourself clean.
And syphilis can... I know it's not supposed to be said as lightly as I'm saying, but it can literally break down your brain. And to tell teenagers that having an intimate time with another person could give you a disease that breaks down your brain, not only is that scary, but it's necessary.
Yeah. Big
time necessary, especially talking about condoms and just communicating.
So there are some resources that we have listed here, and I think it's okay, like a parent, like if you're not feeling comfortable with this, you can take them to their doctor. Sometimes we talked about this before the podcast, that sometimes they take information from others better than they take it from their own parents. So like if your child has a therapist or anything like that, it's okay to like give the therapist like a heads up, like, hey, can you think about it and talking to them about this?
No, and I love that, because we put so much on ourselves. And I think you were saying earlier, this isn't to make you feel bad if you haven't done anything. Don't, we guilt ourselves enough. If this just isn't on your list right now and you just can't handle it, or it's not comfortable, find somebody
find a professional,
that professional that can even help just start the conversation. They don't have to be there for the next 20 years talking them through things, and
use your tribe. I feel like all of our children have that one family member or that cousin that they connect with better than anyone. If you can tap that person in and say, hey, I've really noticed that my son is kind of itching or kind of fiddling a little bit. Do you mind just kind of touching base with him about personal hygiene again?
Yeah.
Talk to your tribe. See who can help. While I'm coaching, I can help 100%. I would not be shy if one of my clients, please don't just take this as you have to do this. But I wouldn't be shy if one of my clients asked me to help them find a self-stimulation device. That's something that would support abstinence, but still help you along with finding personal pleasure. As a coach, I absolutely could help someone find the right tools for their self-fulfillment. But do you want to talk to your parents about that? Not always.
Well, because there are stories where people have damaged themselves.
100% back to addiction.
Yeah.
Back to addiction.
Interesting.
So do we have those people we can talk to, and our team is a big one.
Yeah.
I think also another resource are books. And so if you go to Future Horizons or Jessica Kingsley, and I don't think Woodbine is in publication anymore, sadly. Terry Cohen had a book, Teaching Children with Down Syndrome, about their bodies, boundaries, and sexuality. And I love that one because there was a lot of activities, and one that we did with JR is there was a list of activities. Is this okay or is this against the law? And so it was a conversation starter.
Good. I think role playing would be good too, like for consent.
Yeah, I was thinking that earlier when, trying to prepare and I thought, you could role play, but assign a different part of the body. So my knee is off limits. My elbow is a maybe. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And practice so that you're practicing going through the motions, but not making it weird and not
that's
creating
good,
an interest in somebody that's younger that shouldn't be interested. And so you're not hyper focused on certain areas of those hot spots, but we're going to learn, can I touch your elbow? So elbows are no today. So, can I touch your elbow? You pick one spot and I'm going to ask, can I touch your elbow? Can I touch your shoulder? Yeah. And when I get to that no spot, you tell me no. Yeah. Just practice.
There was a great little snippet that had to come out of Britain because it was a cup of tea. The theme was, what if sex was like a cup of tea? And so, I'm going to start the process. I'm going to boil the water and get the tea out. And well, the person can change their mind in that process. They may say yes at the beginning, but they can still say no, even though you've done all this prep work for it. And one thing that I really liked, now a person who is unconscious, they can't give consent. They can't drink the tea and so it was a euphemism, but it went through a number of scenarios and it was just really well done.
Yeah. And I like that a lot. Yeah. And I could see people, relating it back to probably what I would think my son would think, is that, like I've done all this, so I deserve this, but you don't ever deserve anything. That's why continuous consent is always the way to go. But we do have some books here. We can put them on our website. Sexuality and Relationship Education for Children and Adolescents with Autism Spectrum Disorders by Davida Hartman. Autism, Asperger's, and Sexuality, Puberty and Beyond by Jerry and Mary Newport. And then there's some websites. I know Autism Speaks makes a sexual health toolkit. Planned Parenthood has sex and disability resources. And then amaze.org is a simple factual videos about growing up in relationships. So these aren't perfect, but they give some language and visuals to work with. So that's half the battle.
Yeah.
What do you think, Elizabeth?
I think we did good.
Everybody take a deep breath.
It is. I mean, wasn't as awkward as I thought. Special thanks to our guest, I think. Yeah. You just, you create a certain vibe. And that's the thing. You find that person that, if you're struggling and you're like, but my kid, and just like for Heather and I, we have our nonverbal children and golly, that's just so hard to really kind of know,
But even if you're nonverbal, I remember sitting in a parking lot listening to an NPR story about a sexual abuse that was taking place in a group home. And the young lady had an STD, but they overlooked it because they didn't think she was sexually active. She couldn't give consent. So even nonverbal individuals need to have some sort of training so that they can communicate no, or a way to self-report this.
Yeah.
Dawn, and that is perfect, Dawn, because, and it wasn't even related to consent, but it was, I've always worked with my children and aides that come in. When Nathan says no, you have to respect that. Now, if it's dangerous and he's like, will get himself harmed, you say, I get it. I know you're saying no, but here's why. We're not crossing the street. This is why we're doing this. This is why we're not juggling knives. And I get that you don't want this. So explain it. But yeah, we always, from the time he was little, and really it was for bullying. You just kind of opened my eyes to what we have done to train him, because he knows no means no when he says it, and he will fight if he has said no and you push, because we did train him. So wow, thanks, Don. No, just
a win.
That's that.
And it starts young too with my parents were never the people that said, you have to go kiss your grandparents. You have to go, your uncle wants a hug. You've got to go give him a hug. If I put my arms down and said no, the answer was no. But my cousins, I noticed they didn't always get the same grace. It was, well, you're gonna make Nana cry. You've got to go give her a kiss. And body autonomy should start really, really young.
Yeah.
Really young.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we've all felt uncomfortable as women in general when you have to be respectful, and especially when we were younger, that was definitely the rule. You go hug your grandpa, you go hug your weird Aunt Sal or weird Uncle Sal that you've never met.
I like Disney as a reference for that. I like to play the Frozen when they're in the ballroom. Lord Weselton, he grabs Anna and spins her around the dance floor. And that's your body and that's your space. I also like that movie because you can say, clearly, you cannot marry someone you just met. Things do not have to get serious so fast because they could be an evil villain.
Right.
It's very important to know.
Right.
Well, it is a Disney movie. I think it's a good reference, and it's something that most of our young friends are really interested in. Yeah. She's clearly uncomfortable, but is she saying so? Her body language. He had to grab her. So I really love to come back to Disney movies too, and childish kind of resources, because not only do our young people know it by heart, the songs, everything, we've also watched it with them. So that's our point of connection. A lot of times, even my adult clients, I always end up coming back to Disney. Anna, you cannot marry someone you just met. It's just ridiculous.
Anybody have any closing thoughts? No?
Bodies are not bad. All bodies are good.
Yeah.
No. You have?
Yeah. All different types, shapes.
All of them.
Yep.
Whatever.
So this is one of those parenting topics that feels messy and personal, but it's also pretty important because we're helping our kids navigate the most human parts of growing up. So if you've been avoiding the talk, it's okay. Just start small, ask a question, open a door, and keep it ongoing. So we just want to give you a little bit of confidence, what's worked for us, and we'll go from there. Heather, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I've just been listening because most of this stuff just honestly doesn't apply. Zachary's just, he's just on the way other end. So none of this stuff. All I would say is just that safety. So because I have to do all his hygiene for him, people will offer why don't you have somebody, I'll watch him or I'll see him. Well, the thing is you have to help them with toileting and things like that too. So just from I say this with love, but we just have to be very, very cautious.
Right.
About who are in those spaces with him. And if they don't know him well, and we don't know them well, the answer's no. So that's all I would say, just about kind of what Dawn was mentioning at the end where, someone was taking advantage of somebody with a disability. I just think that has to be top of mind. So to me, if they can't, most of those situations we're not going to be in at all with Zachary, but safety and, that whole concept of, certain spots.
It's a whole new conversation, huh?
It's a whole new conversation. So I feel love for all of you guys that are going through all the other stages. But for us, it's just generally the safety. Like we wouldn't want him in any spot where there's not someone that, well, really, if it's just not me or Michael. Like I say, we have a couple people that if we needed to be gone overnight, we have one grandma and a sister-in-law, and that's about as big as the scope goes. So
Yeah.
So otherwise, love the discussion though.
Yeah.
I learned a
I have too, actually. It's just been really interesting, and I've gotten a lot more perspective on how we go from here on out. So, well, I think we're going to wrap up.
Where can you find us, Tara?
Don's going to do Mary's job today. So you can listen to us on Navigating Adult Autism. You can listen to Navigating Adult Autism on Apple, Spotify, or our YouTube channel. You could also listen to our last 5 episodes on our website, navigatingadultautism.com. Also, you could get to know us on there. We have bios and everything on there. You can also connect with us on social media pages, Facebook, Instagram. Our email is moms@navigatingadultautism.com. Please like and share each episode and subscribe, because that really helps us reach more listeners. And as you can tell tonight, this is a very important topic for us as parents, but also how we talk about these things with our kids and how to start early and all that. So the more you like and subscribe, the better, and the more people we reach. So keep an eye out at the beginning of each month for our autism gossip. It should be coming out here the first of the month. It's curated by our very own Dawn Ruthman. It's the resource guide to all Southwest Missouri autism happenings each month. And it's very important. We try to get everything. So send it to moms@navigatingadultautism.com, and we can try to get your function or your event on the gossip. So, okay, we're going to wrap up. Thanks, ladies.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.